Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Ghost Bath Rose Thorn Necklace, out May 9th on Nuclear Blast. The album has 9 tracks, 35 minutes in length, and this is the band's 5th full-length studio album. They are an American post-black metal band. The design of this album is very fluid, very dynamic, but at the same time compact, because 9 songs in 35 minutes, there's not a lot of wiggle room. Now, the way the album moves makes the record experience excellent. It's not a cumbersome record at all. It could have been had the experience had prolonged itself. Keeping the album at 9 songs, 35 minutes, with 3 of those songs being instrumental tracks, these are all elements that give movement to the record, that jolt the record and make the listening experience a lot better. This is an album that makes itself easier to listen to, regardless if you're going through it the first or the 10th time. Once you start to talk about the sound, there are so many things to talk about here because there's so many things to break down as far as this record is concerned. First and foremost, I was expecting a dark album, perhaps a different kind of darkness, but still in line with what I got from Self-Loather. This album is night and day from its predecessor. You can't even start a comparison here. This album is way more atmospheric, and is way more atmospheric in a more brighter, lighter, expanded way. It also infuses a lot of melancholy through sound and through atmosphere, and you can even go as far as to say even through the vocals. So it's a more melancholic record. It's a record that has a different kind of sound, a different kind of texture, that creates different kind of emotions from it. And because it's not as dark as Self-Loather, it becomes an easier album to listen to. The record itself has a more appealing sound from that standpoint. One of the elements that adds to that appealing sound, but it also adds to the atmosphere and also adds to the melancholy, is the more EDM experience that this record has. That to me was also a huge surprise on this album, considering how much electronic elements, EDM, keys, synthesizers are used throughout the entire record. You're going to notice them a lot more on the instrumental tracks, on the instrumental pieces, because they're able to rise to the surface a little bit easier, but they're there all around. It's a huge part of the sound, like I said, and a huge part of that more melancholic atmosphere that each song transmits. Not an element that I was expecting to work on a record like this, specifically with this band and what they've done on the previous album, but it works well because it fills in the gaps. It creates a very defined experience. It creates a very defined fingerprint. It creates a sense of, like I said, melancholy, a different kind of darkness, not a deep darkness, but more a darkness of thought, not necessarily a darkness that surrounds you. And the melancholy within this record also has a sense of hope. There's a sense of hoping for a brighter future. So that sound represents those kind of experiences, those kind of emotional experiences really well, and they fill in the tracks. They give the tracks a little bit more width. They make the tracks more substantial. You're not just depending on bass, guitar, and drums. Now you're infusing another element, not just as a layer. You're infusing this element as a huge piece of the puzzle, as a huge part of what the overall soundscape is, and that is going to have a direct impact not only on how approachable the album becomes, because it softens the record, it softens the sound of the record quite a bit, but it also creates a much different vibe, a much different mood, and a much different atmosphere across all 9 songs. This is not to say that the drums, guitars, and bass don't play a role. They do. But that EDM side of the sound is so predominant that I feel like when you get to the end of the record, that is going to be the one element on the back of your mind as far as the impact that it had on your appreciation or lack of the album itself. Now, the guitar sound, I felt it was excellent. It had a lot of heaviness. It also added some more melodic pieces to that overall blanket of melancholy that exists on this record. So the guitar sound on this album is very interesting, and it adds great value to the songs. But because of that EDM sound, I never felt like the guitars moved forward enough to be noticeable or to be a driving force on any single track on this record. This album is driven more so by those electronic elements and the atmosphere that comes from it than anything else. And the drums is also a perfect example. I enjoy the drum sound on this album because it has a subtle impact to the perception of the songs, to the size of the songs, and to the depth of the songs. But it's not a drum sound that overpowers or that feels overpowering at any given time. It's very subtle, it's very subdued. Even in the heavier songs, you still feel the drums could have gone a step further. They could have been a little bit heavier, a little bit more in the forefront. And while they sound heavy, they still have a certain distance that they keep throughout the entire album consistently in the more clear songs, but also in the heavier songs as well. Then you get down to the vocals. Like I said, a third of this album is instrumental, 3 instrumental tracks out of the 9. The 6 tracks that have vocals on it, some of them you almost forget that are vocals on it, because the instrumental portions of the tracks are so long, or they're so evolved into the overall fabric of the track, that when the vocals finally come in, you almost don't notice them. They come in and they become part of the tapestry of the song, a lot more like another instrument, a lot less like the prototypical vocal performance on any given record. So it's an interesting approach on this album, because it feels like the vocals become secondary to what the overall experience, to what the overall mood of the song is all about. And I think that's an interesting way of approaching an album that has this sound, that has these sort of characteristics. I'm not necessarily completely sold on this album. I feel like the electronic elements, while interesting in some songs, they feel completely out of place in others. It's very hard for me to tie in all of these loose ends and make some sense out of it. This is a very difficult album for me, because it's not an easy record for me to find my way through. I really had to work hard walking through it. Even though the album design simplifies those mechanisms, it was still a very difficult album for me to process at times. I appreciate the changes, I appreciate the atmosphere, I definitely enjoyed the melancholic side of this record, but I'm a big fan of the darker side of Ghost Bath, and this album had very little of that. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Dandelion Tea, a melodic, melancholic melody that really sets the tone for the track. It's created by the instrumental experience that the song has, and that makes for a very rich track all around. It's a very textured and rich song all around. Then it's a track that also has movement, moving into a heavier, more riff drum driven sound where the vocals come in. So the track starts off very atmospheric, then it moves into this more heavier sound, more heavier presence. The vocals really help add darkness and heaviness to that portion of the song, and then you see some of that darkness of Ghost Bath coming through, but it never really comes through completely, because the overall melancholy that the track has really dominates the experience of the song, and that melody that the song carries through really dictates the mood of where the track is and where the track is going. So it's an interesting song because it's volatile, it has ebbs and flows, and it feels very fluid and very dynamic, and I really like the changes in moods that the track offers. Then we have Vodka Butterfly. The keys, the synths in the background really create a sinister vibe for this song. It goes beyond being melancholic. Now we're talking about a track that is very sinister in its sound, in its essence. The electronic elements also add this very distinct melody that really carries that sense of sinister all the way through the song. The vocals overall have this great sound to them, great presence to them, and they never dilute that emotion that the track starts off with. They kind of add to it, but they don't dilute it, which is really important in my opinion. It allows you to create this duality of sounds within the same song. There's this heavier sound, darker sound at the top and at the bottom. At the bottom with the drums, at the top with the vocals and somewhat the guitars, and then in the middle you have this melodic, melancholic essence that is created by that electronic sound that sits in between those two layers. So it's a song that's very layered, very textured, and it's really interesting to the ears because you can hear the different layers and what they're adding and what they're doing, and you can see that darkness trying to squeeze in the melancholy, and then you also can hear the melancholy try to spread out that darkness. That internal struggle that this song has, that butterfly effect that this song has. It's really interesting and really well done, allows this song to really stand out in the crowd. Actually the last song on the record, the closer, Throat Cancer. This track has this soft EDM sound all the way through, is very soothing. It puts you almost in a trance. It kind of numbs you of any feelings. That's the experience that specific sound brings. The vocals bring a sense of despair, a sense of not being able to control the outcome, a sense of almost resignation. That's kind of the vibe that I got from the vocal performance on this track. The sound has that melancholy built into it, that melody that's so beautiful. This track really has a beautiful melody as its backdrop. And then the heavier pieces, because there's a heavier portion of this song that jolts the track, that explodes the track, adding immense intensity and aggression. But then you see the return to melancholy, and the track really finishes off almost dying out as the album dies out. Really interesting song, a very emotionally charged, driven song to close off the record, closing off on a great note, giving a sense of almost of going full circle, because the album kind of starts off very slow with an instrumental track that builds up, and then this one closes off on an instrumental piece that dies out. So there's a sense of beginning and end as far as the two top ends of this album is concerned, and Throat Cancer is a perfect closer for this album. This is it, Ghost Bath with Rose Thorn Necklace, out May 9th on Nuclear Blast. Hit me up in the comment section, and I'll see you all at the next video. Take care, guys.